Our tradition is when the fish come back, we pay tribute to them. We respect them.
The wild salmon we have coming back now are so important because the hatchery science is really revealing that we can't replicate that. We can't fake wild salmon.
So a lot of people think it's a kind of silver bullet solution. Let's just put more fish out there with hatcheries so we can keep fishing.
I want to share with guests that there's value to the experience, even without taking home a fish at the end of the day.
There is hope. What's the alternative? Do you really want to just stick your head in the sand and pretend that nothing is happening?
We are at the Capilano River Hatchery facility. This is the place that when our families come to visit, we always want to bring them to the hatchery. We always learn something new.
My name is Amanda Palmer, and I'm a video producer. I'm not a scientist or marine biologist, but as a British Columbian, salmon fascinate me. Their life cycle, their biological resilience, and their commercial and cultural significance.
There are fish in the ladders.
Unfortunately, wild salmon stocks are becoming less and less abundant. As of 2020, the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada has listed more than 25 threatened or endangered populations of Pacific salmon. Many other species depend on these fish for food, including endangered southern resident orcas. I teamed up with the David Suzuki Foundation to explore why this was happening and what role, if any, hatcheries play in the health of salmon here in British Columbia. Salmon hatcheries, not to be confused with fish farms, are facilities where fish are artificially bred, hatched, and raised before being released into rivers and streams. They were created with good intentions, to maintain or increase the numbers of available salmon. But do they work? We often hope that salmon hatcheries can make up for declines in salmon from habitat loss or overfishing. But will they? First, I reached out to the David Suzuki Foundation's marine biologist, Jeffrey Young, and conservationist Greg Knox to learn about the challenges salmon face.
Everything from freshwater habitat loss, changing ocean conditions due to climate change and other factors, and different ways that we've potentially overfished them or changed which ones tend to come back where.
Do people see hatcheries as a solution to the declining salmon population?
We've had large-scale hatcheries in British Columbia since the Salmon Enhancement Program was started by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in 1977. At the time, it was largely to compensate for overfishing and habitat destruction from logging and mining, and that worked for a while. It boosted up salmon in certain areas. But over time, those hatcheries have had a lot of problems.
After those hatcheries were built, in many cases, we didn't actually see increases in numbers. And over time, we've seen decreases in numbers. But ultimately, they didn't work the way we expected.
Okay. Do you know why they didn't work the way we expected?
Well, what we know and what we're learning is that hatchery and wild fish just aren't the same. In general, hatchery fish tend to be weaker than wild fish. They tend to not get as big, they tend not to survive as well. Just that short period of time not living in the wild tends to change them. And if they spawn with the wild fish, their slightly weaker genetics tend to dilute or weaken the wild genetics as well. And then you have this potential problem where over time you're slowly weakening kind of the genetic structure and the overall survival of a salmon population.
And why are the genetics weaker?
The simplest answer for why they're weaker is that they're just missing a part of their natural life cycle. And if you don't let the wild strong ones survive, you can lose some of that natural selection that makes sure the strongest and best fish are able to spawn.
We're creating more problems for our wild salmon. The hatchery fish compete for food. So in a stream where these hatchery fish are released, there's also wild salmon in there. We're already putting out over 5 billion young salmon from these hatchery facilities each year. Most of those fish are coming from Alaska, Russia, and Japan. And we're overcrowding the North Pacific with hatchery fish. And they're simply overgrazing the North Pacific. It's akin to putting more cows on a field when there's not enough grass for the existing cows there to eat.
Next, I spoke with Barry Cortacito, a 33-year veteran with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and member of the Squamish First Nation. As a community advisor in the Salmon Enhancement Program on Vancouver Island, it was Barry's job to make sure First Nations were properly consulted.
Can you tell me about the connection that First Nations have with salmon?
We've always had a close connection to the environment, particularly fish. Fish provide us with food. They provide food for animals. Our tradition is when the fish come back, we pay tribute to them. We acknowledge them and we hold our hands up for allowing them to come and feed us. We respect them. I was with fisheries since 1979, and we had basically two types of hatcheries, the large scale, which produce millions of fish. Major facilities, the big hatcheries, are there to produce for the commercial or sport. That's their main role. So our role was slightly different. It was to engage the community and rebuild the stocks. And that whole program was designed to invite native and non-native communities into the fisheries recovery program to bring the stocks back. You have to sit down with the community, get their input, their involvement, and put out a strategy to do whatever you're going to do.
I don't think people generally know that there are different kinds of hatcheries and that, yeah, they can have different roles and objectives, some of which are very good. One is when you've really lost a lot of a salmon population and you don't really have a way to recover it without using some sort of intervention. The goal should always be to say, can we get to a place where we don't need this hatchery anymore? A way to really test whether an operation is truly a conservation hatchery would be that the goal would be to stop producing hatchery fish at some point and allow the wild population to sustain itself.
As Jeffrey noted, not all hatcheries are created equal. Smaller hatcheries, like the one managed by Howie Wright in the Okanagan, focus on recovering endangered salmon stocks.
With the levels we were at for sockeye in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had returns as low as 2,500
Single fish, 2,500 fish in total.
In total. That made a hatchery for restoration required. We're the only private First Nations facility that has our own aquaculture license on salmon for restoration. It's part of the requirement or obligation as an Okanagan person to bring the salmon back, recognizing there's different types of hatcheries. And I think moving away from the large production hatcheries and using smaller facilities that are within a current basin temporarily, that you don't have that large infrastructure cost, that it would be hard to say turn off or reduce down.
The Department of Fisheries and Oceans spends over $15 million a year on large production hatcheries. And so it's costing the taxpayers a lot of money. So a lot of people think it's a kind of silver bullet solution. Let's just put more fish out there with hatcheries so we can keep fishing.
Is there any way for sport fishing or commercial fishing to exist with conservation?
Sport and commercial fishers are the most important conservation advocates we have, other than First Nations. And so they've been critical throughout the history of British Columbia in ensuring that we have healthy populations of salmon, and especially wild salmon.
So we do fishing charters primarily for salmon. One of the things that we really focus on is that anytime that we take someone out, we have an opportunity to talk with our guests about salmon and about the fascinating journey that is the life cycle of salmon. There's no better way to make those connections than doing it in a place like this.
What we are marketing and offering to our guests is an experience and a connection to their food system. You know, we don't want anyone to have to explain to their kids one day like what salmon were, because we've watched them go extinct during the operation of our business.
Hatcheries were intended to relieve some of the pressure on wild salmon stocks. They educate a lot of people about what the salmon ecosystem and life cycle is. The issue is that hatcheries have sort of been used as sort of this feel-good panacea approach to salmon sustainability. The returns are not there. There needs to be a much more comprehensive approach to sustainability.
If fisheries were to close down fishing for a period of time, how would that affect your business?
It would be a massive blow. But at the same time, if we're going to preserve salmon stocks for the long haul, then everyone's got to make sacrifices. Our priority is not this season or the next season, but it's 10 seasons from now when our son is driving the boat and, taking his friends out to go fishing.
Taking a step back from the hatchery debate and looking to the future, I reached out to Dr. Elaine Leung, a marine biologist and founder of the educational nonprofit Sea Smart, to find out what the kids are saying.
And it's all about getting kids excited about our oceans and helping them foster their connection, curiosity, and love with nature.
The students that you are engaging are advocates. They're advocating for the oceans, for the environment.
We have so many students that are just so incredibly excited to learn more about the oceans. But what's more important is that they're taking these messages home.
What can we learn from the students in your courses?
How important it is to be optimistic and hopeful for the planet. I think that's something that's really amazing about the kids, is that they're always so excited and passionate and open-minded.
If these kids can be open-minded and optimistic about the environment, so can we. That said, what role should hatcheries play in the future?
We can't just rely on a system that requires year after year continuing to produce and release fish. It's just not a sustainable way to go about it. And the wild salmon we have coming back now are so important because they're the ones that are surviving some of the challenges, that we've put on them, but also that larger oceanic condition changes and competition with hatchery fish from other countries are dealing with. They're super valuable, and giving them the best chance to carry those really important genes into their natural river systems, spawning and then creating the next generation is really critical to trying to give salmon a chance to persist into the future.
On the positive note, salmon are incredibly resilient. If we're honest with ourselves about wanting to have salmon in the future, then we have to be a lot more thoughtful about how we take care of them. It doesn't mean that we can't go fishing anymore. What it means is we have to have better tools to understand how many fish are coming back in season. At the end of the day, we just need to give them a chance.
Salmon recovery is complex. And after speaking with so many passionate researchers, conservationists, and business owners, I'm starting to see the bigger picture. Whether you're a hatchery manager, an angler, or a consumer, we're all in this together. Starting the conversation is the first step towards saving salmon. To learn more about what the David Suzuki Foundation is doing to help salmon, orcas, and ocean ecosystems, and how you can help, visit davidsuzuki.org.